good, everybody? Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast. I'm Andy Young, Kevin Carroll, my partner in crime, on assignment today. I've always wanted to say that. So we'll bring in a special guest, our good buddy Sal Capaccio from WGR Sports Radio and the Buffalo Bills sideline reporter on the WGR radio broadcast across the Buffalo Bills radio network. Sal, this is kind of like the second season, I call it, in the NFL, where everybody gets just as excited almost in some ways for free agency, trades, the draft coming up. I mean, this is just really a fun time of year when everybody's kind of the armchair GMs and you got the real GMs out there doing work.
Yeah, for sure. Good to join you today, buddy. You know, I remember there used to be a commercial at the end of the Super Bowl, and I miss it. I wish they'd play it again, where they'd have the song from Annie, "The sun will come out tomorrow," and they would have people, and at the end it said everybody's 0-0, right? And like that's what it is after the Super Bowl. It all resets. There's so much hope in the air. Okay, my team wasn't good. We got to sign some free agents, draft some guys, make some trades. My team is really good. They're just very close. We just need to fill a few holes. And then of course we get to this point, and then people start spending money, and fans get upset or fans get happy, and it's all really interesting. And of course it leads into the draft. The NFL calendar never stops.
Oh, it's incredible. 24/7. Like, we're on the clock all the time as people who observe and cover the NFL. I mean, there's things coming out late at night, early in the morning. It really never sleeps, and it's just a lot of fun because it gives us something to do all the time, something to talk about all the time. The NFL's very good, very strategic at making us do that. Sal, I want to start with talking about the Bills and some of the moves they've reportedly made as we record this here during the NFL's so-called legal tampering period before roster and free agency moves can actually be announced before the start of the league year on Wednesday. We'll start with Joshua Palmer, and this has gotten some traction both positively and negatively across Bills fans, social media. The wide receiver, former Los Angeles Charger, a guy who has had some flashes but has never been a superstar, but they bring him in. What is your take on Joshua Palmer and how he fits with what the Bills want to be?
So, yeah, I think that the negative has mostly been either A, about the money, or B, the fact that he's not some dynamic speed receiver that beats everybody, with a straight line speed. So let me, kind of tell you why the Bills would do something like this. I remember last year going down to Baltimore, that Sunday night game against the Baltimore Ravens. Derrick Henry, 86, 87 yards, first play of the game. And as the game goes on, the Bills really never got off the mat. And one of the reasons why, though, Andy, was it was clear that night to me, and I said it on the radio the next day, they had no ability to get separation with their wide receivers. Now, Khalil Shakir was injured early in that game, which did hurt this. But really, the Bills just could not separate. They could not find a way to get open off the line of scrimmage. And what the Ravens did was they said, we know you can't separate, so we're going to load up, press you, get up in your face, and then we're going to come after your quarterback. And Josh Allen got beat up, and I was really worried for the Bills quarterback, after that game, that teams were just going to do this. They were going to play man-to-man. They're going to load up on him. They're going to go after the quarterback. And that's really how teams did have success when they did ultimately lock up the Bills. The Bills had a great offense last year, but in the times that they weren't that great, a lot of it was because they just didn't have separators, guys that could beat somebody off the line of scrimmage. So that's what they needed this offseason. Josh Palmer, that's his skill set. Josh Palmer he's a bigger Stephon Diggs, like as far as his body type. Stephon's 6'1", 190. He's 6'2", he's 6 foot 190. Josh Palmer is 6'1", 210. But they're very similar in the fact that they're both excellent route runners. They can really get open with separation through their route running and being able to navigate once they get to certain spots of the route. And the thing about Josh Palmer is he's not slow. He ran a 4.52, I think. It's not super blazing fast, but he can get open down the field. He had the third highest average depth of target in the NFL last year at over 15 yards. We'll see if the Bills employ him like that. But that's why the Bills signed him. I don't expect Josh Palmer to have these unbelievable volume numbers and be an all-pro receiver because of that. But I do expect him to fill a very, very specific skill that the Bills did not have yet on their roster and desperately needed.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Amari Cooper deal that we talked about so much, is that they needed somebody in that spot to take up some of those plays where you need a guy to beat man coverage, to get downfield one-on-one, to pick up that 3rd and 12 and be able to get away from a guy that isn't named Khalil Shakir, right? To have another option out there, or just to throw a lob ball to Keon Coleman. So in Palmer, like you said, I don't think he's a guy who's your alpha number one. That's not what this signing was about. I think he's more of a guy, like you said, Sal, who fits a role in what they've clearly shown is this everybody eats mentality. We've joked a lot about that. It came to fruition last season, and for the most part, it worked. I think it's interesting talking to Brandon Beane during the NFL scouting combine, asking him about wide receivers, he kind of was a little bit almost defensive in that, hey, do we really need to go out and get this alpha number one guy? Because we just had the NFL MVP quarterback, and we just had the highest scoring team in franchise history. So do we really need that in the way that we construct our offense? What do you think about that?
Well, listen, I think that as long as you have Josh Allen and playing at an elite level, I think the Bills will always have a philosophy of we're not going to pay for the top end wide receivers because he can elevate everybody's game. And that allows them to spread the money around the rest of the roster. And what they've done is they've taken that money, they paid their 2 tackles, Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown. They paid guys on defense, they're giving extensions out. And yes, I know Josh Allen's extension, of course, which we can talk about. That's a lot of money. But I think their philosophy is we're not going to pay a ton for running backs. We're not going to pay a ton for wide receivers because the guy that really controls all of that, he can help make everybody better with the way that we want to play football. So, look, I think the Bills still need speed on offense. I do. I think they need speed at wide receiver. And I understand the complaint or criticism from any Bills fan that says, well, this doesn't satisfy that. And I get that. I understand that. But a receiving core isn't made up of just fast guys or just big guys. You need a whole bunch of skill sets to make sure that everybody can complement each other. And that's what the Bills really try to do in free agency. Free agency is about fit. They look at their team and say, okay, we are this close. What do we need to get over the hump? What do we need to beat the Kansas City Chiefs or whatever team to make sure we can actually ultimately get to the Super Bowl? And they identified this one specific need on offense, and that's why they went after Josh Palmer.
What have you seen in Palmer and looking back at some of the highlights and some of the clips that are out there on YouTube? I know Eric Turner from Cover One had a nice breakdown of Joshua Palmer's game in terms of what he's been able to do. Like, he showed flashes where he's been able to beat the Chiefs deep. He's been able to get open on in-cutting plays, on out routes, those sorts of things. Like, what do you like about his game and the way that he's able to attack opposing defenders?
I like the fact that he is able to manipulate once he gets to the top of the route, let's say. And I know they're a completely different player, but I'll describe it. That's what Cole Beasley did. Cole Beasley's, why he was so great, when he got to the top of the route and he was able to turn his body, you didn't know if he was going right or left. He actually had a really great way about him to make a defender miss or guess. And I think that's what Josh Palmer does from the outside, not from the inside, which is really a very valuable skill set in today's NFL against some very athletic and bigger corners. If you can get them to say, okay, I don't really know and I have to guess where he's going to go, and you can have an ability to kind of go left or right or come back to the ball. And then once the ball's thrown, he's very good at catching the ball with people around him. So if you look at his separation numbers, people have said, well, separation numbers aren't good. Well, yeah, because he's not the guy that's just running down the field past people. He actually, that's his skill set is to catch the ball when he doesn't have separation. He's a man separator, meaning he's better doing that than most people are. But the separation numbers aren't going to be great because it's man-to-man defense and guys are going to be closer to you. But he's really good at getting more separation in those situations as most people are in those situations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think some of the blowback from this is you're not bringing in a guy who's an all-pro or a pro bowler or a massive known commodity. Part of the thing, too, is I think Bills fans, a lot of them, had their hearts set on DK Metcalf when he demanded a trade, and a lot of people thought, all right, that's a guy that fits that outside, exactly what you need. He's got speed, he's got size, all of those things that you might want in that position for the Bills. But, I mean, it's pretty clear Brandon Beane didn't value DK Metcalf at a second-round pick and signing him to a $30 million a year deal.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think because there were some names out there, Myles Garrett is another one, obviously, we talked a lot about. People, I think, really convinced themselves the Bills would be getting one of these big names. And maybe it's still Trey Hendrickson for a lot of people. But since that's not the case, they look at, so far, the start of free agency as a failure. And that's fine if you want to look at it like that. But I think the Bills, they've shown consistently to be able to build a really great roster. Has it won the Super Bowl? No. But they're right there. They're the second winningest organization over the last 7 years behind only the Kansas City Chiefs. They're the most winning team in any 7-year span of football without making it to a Super Bowl, which stinks. And you say, well, you got to get to the Super Bowl. But look, you'd rather be in this position than teams are just throwing money because they're trying to fix problems because they have no talent on the roster. The Bills have talent on the roster. They're very good. They're going to be right back in the mix again next year. And I understand when people want to have, and this is, you said it to start the show, like this is the fun season. It's a second season. Well, a lot of it is because of the shiny toys that you can sign. The Bills have done that. They signed Mario Williams, and they've signed other guys over the years to come in here. But, that's not what necessarily wins. What wins is putting together the proper roster that can compete on a weekly basis with the right fit.
What do you think about Mack Hollins leaving for the Patriots reportedly? I really thought the Bills would bring him back. Now, Mack got himself a nice little payday and a 2-year deal out of it. Maybe the Bills weren't willing to go there, but I thought he was a glue guy. He not for nothing, he led the team in touchdown receptions. So, I thought they'd find a way to bring him back. I was a little surprised that didn't work out, but if dude got paid, he got paid, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you. I'll say I was definitely wrong when I was saying on the radio for the last week, I'm very confident the Bills and Mack Hollins can work something out. And I know for sure that Mack Hollins loved his time in Buffalo this year and that the Bills really loved having him. But look, I think it's in a business, right? And I think two things probably happened here. Number one, Mack Hollins got more money and the Bills were probably willing to pay him. He's going to earn up to $10 million in a 2-year deal. Last year he played for 2 and change. I don't think the Bills wanted to go much higher than that. Maybe I would say 3.5 was always something that I thought that they could do. Maybe even get up to 4. He's going to make baseline that and maybe get up to $10 million, $5 million a year for the next couple of years. But I think the other thing that happened is if you're Mack Hollins, let's remember when this happened. It happened after we learned the Bills signed Josh Palmer. If you're Mack Hollins, you're looking at the wide receiver depth chart and saying, okay, well, now I'm behind Shakir, Coleman, Samuel, Palmer. I'm the 5th guy. I'm 30-something years old. I'm still playing special teams. And let's not discount this one major factor. Josh McDaniels is now the offensive coordinator with the New England Patriots. He worked with Mack Hollins together in Vegas, so I'm sure that had something to do with it. And he actually had a pretty nice year when he was with them.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So now that Hollins is reportedly gone, but you bring in Palmer, you're still left with 5 guys. You probably need a couple of more guys there in that mix. Do you think that another move could be in store or a trade could be out there? Certainly the draft is definitely a possibility because the Bills still need a couple of more guys to bring into that room.
Oh, for sure. Listen, typically the Bills, I think, bring about 13 or 14 wide receivers to training camp. Right now they only have 7 listed on their roster. I have Shakir, Coleman, Palmer, Samuel, then KJ Hamler, Tyrell Shavers, and Jalen Virgil. By the way, maybe Tyrell Shavers becomes your Mack Hollins replacement, right? A bigger body who can play special teams. He can be a gunner. Maybe that's a guy that they figure, hey, we'll go younger, and he becomes a guy. He did a lot last year in preseason and camp. We thought he'd make the team. He didn't, but then he gets elevated, has his only professional touch. He goes for a touchdown last year, his first one. But I do think they have to go out and, add to it. They'll do something in the draft and undrafted free agency, of course. But as of right now, you're probably looking at a good 5-6 additions still to come at the wide receiver group.
Yeah, I think they would still like to draft a receiver in the first couple of days of the draft. I don't know that that's going to be pick 30 if a guy they love falls to him or if that's going to be later down the line. But I think it's still important to continue to replenish that, even if you're not getting your A1 alpha guys every single time, because it's hard to get those guys. And some of them are drafted in the top 10. Some of them come later, but it's not easy to get those guys. But I think you just need to keep pressing the button on wide receiver and replenishing that time over time.
Yeah, and I think the Bills, like I said, have operated with a thought of, look, we're not going to pay big money for these guys, but who knows if one of them develops. If Keon Coleman becomes great, then you cross that bridge when you come to it and you try to pay one of your own. But in the meantime, you keep replenishing, as you said. You bring in guys on shorter-term deals, Curtis Samuel for 3 years, Josh Palmer for 3 years, and then you see where it goes from there. And, of course, then you identify somebody you really like. And Khalil Shakir is somebody they really like. They developed him. They signed him to a 4-year contract extension, and it's not massive money, but he's going to be a guy that's going to matter going forward. Again, I'd say probably the number one option at this point.
Yeah. All right. Want to flip it to the defensive side of the football, and another move that the Bills have reportedly made in signing Michael Hoecht, who doesn't really have a position, it seems like. If you look at the listings online and where he's played, I think he's been listed at linebacker, defensive end, defensive tackle, edge, all these different spots because he's really a versatile piece. 6'4", he's been up to 310 pounds. I know the Rams had him down in the 260s at one point. Another Ontario native like Josh Palmer is nearby Buffalo, so sort of a homecoming for him. What do you make of his signing and the type of player he could be in the Bills' defense?
Yeah, and first of all, from what I understand, I
Michael
don't know
Hoit.
Hoit,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it is Michael Hoit, and it's kind of funny because it doesn't look like it, right?
Yep.
So I'm wondering if he did that because everybody screwed up his name.
Yeah, Michael Hoit. Yep.
Just call me Hoit.
Yep.
Hoecht, right?
Yeah.
It looked like when they signed him, I thought they were re-signing Jochen Hesch to
Right.
to the Buffalo Bills, because remember that guy for the Sabres
Yeah.
spelled the same, very similar.
Sal,
All right,
I even wrote this down. I wrote on the piece of paper I have in front of me here, Hoit, and I still said Hecht, and I knew I was going to do it, and I still screwed it up. So my apologies to Michael
it's all
Hoit.
good.
Yeah.
It's all good. I had to go back. I actually went yesterday. I went into the Rams pronunciation guide to make sure and how they were calling him. I watched some videos.
I did the same thing.
Apparently, it is Hoit. All right.
Yeah.
So that being said, so I'll be honest. I was a bit surprised by this signing, because this is not typically the kind of guy the Bills sign. And what I mean by that is they love versatility. We know that. That's not what I mean. They love versatility, but they love the versatility of where, oh, this guy can play inside and outside. This guy can play boundary corner and nickel corner. This guy can play safety and linebacker. This guy, Michael Hoit, he can literally play anywhere in the front seven, but there's no true position for him. And that, to me, the Bills have to have some sort of plan there. Is he a full-time edge rusher? I mean, I doubt you do. Maybe they feel that, hey, he's just coming into his own. He had 6 sacks a couple years ago. We're going to use him like that. He's not going to be an off-ball linebacker. They have Terrel Bernard and Matt Milano in that spot. Is he going to be a defensive tackle? I don't think he's big enough to do that, but he can squeeze down. He can play in that spot as he has before. I think this is the kind of guy that he's a fantastic athlete. To me, you probably have a weekly plan for him, which is, okay, it's like Dalton Kincaid. Okay, this week, you flex him out wide, you put him more in line. I think a great example is Ty Johnson against the Lions. Remember when Ty Johnson had that big game at running back catching passes against the Lions? That was a great game plan by Joe Brady. But let's go to the other side of the ball and say, I think on a week-to-week basis, they're going to have a plan for Michael Hoit and where he lines up. So very intrigued. I'm very fascinated by how this is going to play out with a guy who's played all over the front seven. He's even been there's a clip of him lining up outside and covering DK Metcalf off the line of scrimmage, which is incredible. And then don't underestimate his special teams value. He blocked 3 kicks last year, Andy. He had 2 field goals and a PAT blocked, and the Bills, I'm sure, would love to have a game-changing type of block in a situation like that.
Yeah, it's the kind of player they haven't had a lot of, in that he's a guy where if you were to put him down at defensive tackle, he's one of those guys where he's standing up, right? He's in a 2-point stance, and he can kind of he's almost like a blitzing linebacker, but a whole lot bigger, right?
Yep, no doubt. And it reminds me of when they signed Lorenzo Alexander years ago. You remember Lorenzo?
Mm-hmm.
And Lorenzo had actually played offensive line at 300 pounds and even blocking tight end. And then he shifted over to D-line, and then he lost some weight to play defensive end, and then he lost more weight to play linebacker, became a 12-sack guy for the Buffalo Bills. And he was a guy, that obviously was a big part of what the Bills did Sean McDermott's first few years in Buffalo. And maybe they went back and said, hey, we missed that kind of guy, a guy that can really do a lot of different things, and we can put him in a lot of different spots.
How does that square with losing Von Miller, releasing Von Miller in that move? There's been so much talk around the Bills this offseason about bolstering both the edge and the defensive line. How does that square? Because we still haven't seen any big moves yet as far as replacing those guys or bumping somebody up in the front.
I still think they need a game-changing type of player. They need a game-changing type of defensive lineman. Von Miller, obviously, he wasn't necessarily that anymore, but he was still good at what he did. There were some good analytics and advanced numbers on him. Greg Rousseau is a very good edge defender. He can rush the passer. He can set the edge. That's why he got paid what he did, and he's still very young. A.J. Epinesa can get to the quarterback once in a while. We know that. They have some guys on the defensive interior that can show flashes like Ed Oliver, but very inconsistent. They still need that one piece. So how I square this up with it is, unless you are using Michael Hoit as your full-time edge defender, which I don't think they're going to, they still have to address that spot, because this has been an area, as we all know, that has not been good enough in the biggest of moments in games for the Buffalo Bills over the last several years. The problem is, Andy, I don't know where you get that guy from now. It's not necessarily going to happen in free agency. Obviously, you could make a play to try and trade for Trey Hendrickson, but what kind of contract are you giving him? And if this team feels they're going to go to the draft and get that guy, well, you don't usually get him at number 30. You'd have to probably either trade up or you're waiting on a guy to develop. So I think it's a really interesting situation there.
Is it a case where they're just going to have to kind of bargain bin shop a little bit like they've done in many years? I mean, they've devoted a lot of resources to the defensive line, but it hasn't really worked out in terms of consistent, constant game-wrecking production. And we've heard Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane talk about the desire and the want to get those kinds of guys, but like you said, they don't grow on trees. So, like, how do you go into the next season when this has been identified by a lot of people as like a big need for your team without getting that big piece? I think a lot of Bills fans are going to be puzzled or upset, frustrated by that.
For sure. Well, they only have 4 edge defenders. I'm going to count Michael Hoit as an edge defender right now.
Sure.
And, I mean, who knows? You could put him wherever. They only have 4 on their active roster right now. Hoit, Rousseau, Epinesa, and a guy that I actually think is a sneaky play here that we're not talking enough about is Javon Solomon. I think Javon Solomon showed some flashes last year. He's going to be year 2. Now, is this a guy that's going to produce 10 sacks this year? No, I wouldn't say that. But I do think he's a guy that factors into their plans, and they figure, hey, he's developed, he's come along. And the Bills have had very good development for their players in this regime. That's what they do. They draft a guy, they develop him. Look what they just did with this 22 draft class, and even going back to Greg Rousseau in 21. But the guys, they're extending now. We're talking about Benford and Cook in that class who still haven't gotten extended. We're talking about Khalil Shakir and Terrel Bernard, Rousseau the year before that. They've done a good job of developing. I think they really think that Javon Solomon could be a guy like that. But is that the answer to all this? Probably not. Dwan Smoot is still a free agent. He's still out there. Do they bring him back? I don't really know. It's tough. I understand any fan that is wondering where that's going to come from, but they have to do some work there. They only have 4 guys as edge defenders right now.
Big questions about cornerback, too. Rasul Douglas set to become a free agent. They could possibly bring him back. Haven't seen any whispers about any guys signing with the Bills in terms of cornerback 2 to go along with Christian Benford. To me, that strikes me as kind of the next shoe to drop, another big spot they've got to figure out what they want to do.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Rasul Douglas is a free agent, and I've believed that they probably think that they're better off maybe going in a different direction. It doesn't mean I don't think they will, no doubt not bring back Rasul Douglas. It could happen. But he wasn't the same in 2024 as he was in the back end of 2023 when he came in after the trade. And he is, he's over 30 years old now. So unless they feel that Jamarcus Ingram is the answer on the outside to start opposite Christian Benford, which I don't know if they would feel that at this point. I don't see how they would, but maybe. I mean, I like Jamarcus Ingram, but that's a pretty tall ask. They're going to have to address this somehow, shape, or form. And I think it becomes maybe what they look at very early in the draft, even first round. I think you're looking at defensive tackle and corner one way or the other as maybe the first 2 picks in the draft, unless there is another guy out there that you can bring in that you're confident in. Look, I know there's always the Dane Jacksons of the world that were released you could bring in, but I think they need something a little more there. And then you look at Benford, his contract situation, they're going to have to pay him at some point, or he's going to go into the final year of his deal, and you could wind up losing him. So this is a really, I think, interesting spot. This goes back to, though, Andy, that Kyrie Elam just never worked out, right? I mean, like 2022 first-round pick just never worked out. And, obviously you needed more from him, and if he had worked out, we'd be in a different situation here with this position. But it hasn't, and now they're in a spot where I think they have to certainly add what looks to be a quality starting corner opposite Christian Benford.
Do they keep him on the roster or release him outright? I mean, that's such a tough question. Try to trade, throw him in as a trade, or do they just keep him for depth? I mean, you're right. We've all seen it. It hasn't worked for whatever reason that is, behind the scenes, on the field, whatever it is about Kyrie Elam, that has not worked in his first 3 years in the NFL and the Buffalo Bills. As a first-round pick they traded up to get in 2022, yeah, they got lucky with Benford because that kind of filled that spot, but you want both guys to hit. But I just wonder how they're going to handle that. I mean, he's being paid first-round pick money. Do they trade him? Do they just let him go altogether, or kind of wait and see?
Well, I think Brandon Beam would love to trade him. That's my personal opinion. I think he'd love to be able to get an asset for him because, A, it's the only way to actually save some money from his salary cap hit. If they release him outright, whether it's now, June 1st, doesn't matter. Before training camp or after training camp, doesn't matter. He's costing over $4 million on your cap. You can absorb that. You don't want to take a $4.3 million cap hit, I think is what it would be, but you could absorb it. You could do it. I don't think that's the preferred outcome. If you could save $2.5 million on his salary cap, then you do it with a trade, and you get an asset for a guy that most likely you're not having back anyway in 2026, so he's going to go to the last year of his contract. He would wind up going to another team anyway, so I think that'd be the preferred outcome. But if you have to get to a point where you release him, then you're going to save. Then you're not going to save any money at all. Or you could keep him on the roster and hope that hey, it's break glass in case of emergency, and he'll just do the same thing he's done for the last few years and be inactive and just play when guys get injured.
These 2021 and 2022 guys that are getting new contracts, and lots of talk about Benford still to come. What do you think about the James Cook situation and where that heads? We've seen Shakir get paid, Bernard get paid, Rousseau. You figure they probably would like to pay Benford if they can work it out. Where does that fit in with James Cook? That's such an interesting discussion about the value and resources, the production, whether that was a one-off last year, getting 16, 18 touchdowns out of the guy, or he dips back to 2 touchdowns like he had his first 2 seasons, and what the overall value of running back is in Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott's minds.
It's so funny. I took a call on the radio this morning, and someone said, well, why don't you just give him $11 million, and he'll be happy with that? I'm like, well, because he doesn't want that. He's been clear. He wants $15 million. He can't force a guy to sign a certain contract, and the Bills have their number. I don't think the Bills are interested in paying him $15 million. So we'll see. This is a spot that has not – it's pretty foreign to Brandon Beane since he's been general manager, to have a guy that kind of is very vocal about what he wants and having a bit of a standoff, if you want to call it that, which hasn't gotten to that point yet. It could be very messy. It could be ugly, and that hasn't happened for the Buffalo Bills. I don't think the Bills are going to move off the fact that they don't want to pay James Cook $15 million, and I don't know if James Cook's going to move off that number. A lot of times those things do happen, though. You do kind of meet in the middle of wherever each side is, but the Bills' philosophy at running back has been we don't pay guys a lot of money. We don't use premium picks on him, although he was a second-round pick, but they don't pay these huge contracts. We use them, we let them go, we replenish, and we roll with Josh Allen as the focal point of the offense, and that's been their philosophy. And I don't know if it's going to change with James Cook, but if it does change, I still can't see them paying anywhere near the top of the market for running backs.
Yeah, Allen the linchpin to it all, because we saw with Everybody Eats, we've seen so far at least with how they're treating the wide receiver position, what we think they'll do with the running back position is that they do believe that Allen raises all ships, right? The high tide raises all ships, and he elevates these guys to more than what they would be without Josh Allen and the constraints and the confines of the Bills' offense. So to me, locking him up, Allen, long-term, to that bigger, even bigger deal, an NFL record $250 million guaranteed coming off an MVP season. It's both a reward and a sign of how they want to handle things moving forward.
Yeah, he gets the most money ever guaranteed, but the average salary at $55 million isn't, astronomical, breaking the bank compared to other quarterbacks and what his market value is. And that tells me that Josh and the Bills got together and said, and by the way, let's remember, 6-year contract. They rip up the old 4-year deal. It's a 6-year deal. You could put void years on there. You could spread that $330 million over, 7 or 8 years, I guess, if you want to do a couple of void years. And then that really allows the Bills to lower the cap number this year. And that tells me the Bills and Josh Allen both decided, let's make something that, hey, does put him in the stratosphere of highest paid ever because he's an MVP, but also gives the team cap flexibility to keep this whole thing moving forward and giving him more weapons and the Bills an ability to contend for championships while they have number 17.
We know Brandon Beane loves to make a big splash. He riverboat gambler type of thing. He likes to make a big move when he can, whether that's in the draft, a signing, trades. Do you think he still has something out there, given the new contracts that they've signed with guys, the extensions, the Allen deal to maybe free up some cap space? Is there still the possibility, we haven't even hit the new league year yet as we record this, that there is that big swing at some point from Beane?
Sure. I think there's always a possibility. Remember the year that he said he didn't have much money, and then they signed Von Miller to a $120 million contract, right?
Yep.
We'll see. I wonder – I'm confident Matt Milano is back. I wonder if there's anything done with his contract. I think there's some things you could do there. I'm wondering about A.J. Epinesa. He's always been a sneaky June 1st cut candidate, although without Von Miller, not saying it would happen, but I wonder if that's something you could save $7 million there. You'd free up some space. They do like A.J. Connor McGovern can get a contract extension. He can lower his cap number. He's got 1 year left on him. That's someone we haven't talked enough about, I think, in that regard. So there's always a few levers here and there that you can pull.
Yeah, before we let you go, Sal, talked a lot about football. Baseball season right around the corner. Beautiful weather here in Western New York as we record this. But, man, your Yankees, Garrett Cole, what are you feeling about that? Tommy John surgery, that's brutal.
It's terrible. He's out. Louis Heel is out. He was the AL Rookie of the Year last year. Giancarlo Stanton, I guess, is banged up, as he always is. I've never been a Stanton fan, and then he made me one during the playoffs last year, the way he played, obviously. Judge isn't getting any younger. But look, I think the Yankees done a good job of kind of, filling some holes. And believe it or not, our buddy Sal Mayorana, who is the most bitter Yankee fan you ever meet, but a huge Yankee fan, who's always negative, about a month ago, I said, are they better or worse after losing Soto? He said, actually better. So
wow.
I think that's really interesting, right? And now they're not going to be without Cole, obviously. But my point is, I think they did some things to help out the roster. We'll see, but it's not good news. And it's really, really terrible to see for Garrett Cole, obviously missing the entire 2025 season. Hopefully he bounces back in 2026.
Yeah, I'm a Guardians fan, and I'm always riding this wave with them. I'm not a diehard fan like I used to be when I was a kid, when they were the Indians back in the day with Albert Bell and Kenny Lofton. I'm in and out with it, but you watch them every couple of years, they make this run, and then they fall back off and make a run and fall off. So it's like it's this never-ending battle with them. Are they going to be good again? They're pretty good typically, but they always somewhere in there have a down year.
Yeah, I mean, baseball's the shortest offseason. Here we are again, ready to rock and roll. So I'll be dialed in on the Yankees. What doesn't matter how good or bad they're supposed to be, watching them every week, but of course in every game. But it should be interesting, obviously, without Cole and without Soto, and that was a big blow, obviously.
Yeah, and best part about this season to me is getting the kids out there for Little League. I know your son plays baseball. My son is starting baseball for the first time this year, so that'll be an interesting experiment. He's playing soccer, too, so we're going to be locked and loaded. It's busy time, Sal. Love it.
Good for him. No doubt about it. Good luck to him, too.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for us here on the latest edition of the Buffalo End Zone podcast. My thanks to Sal Capaccio from WGR Sports Radio, and you hear him on the Bills Radio Network on the sidelines during the game. We'll be back with Kevin Carroll, I'm sure, probably later this week when we start to hear more about free agent signings and all that good stuff. Kevin Carroll will be back with me. But for now, I'm Andy Young. You've been listening and watching Buffalo End Zone.